Good morning, colleagues. Really good to see all of you. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. I'm Jacqueline Lam, the Regional Director for Asia for Sustainable Energy for All, and I'm very pleased this morning to be moderating our session for scaling up ESCOs and cooling efficiency. We have a very distinguished panel of speakers coming up. But before we kick off with our speakers, I just wanted to do a little bit of scene setting and just look at some of the key areas of support that's needed on cooling, on scaling sustainable cooling in the region and how ESCOs have a role in being able to do that. First of all, in 2023, Sustainable Energy for All helped with some, and just for those of you who are not familiar with Sustainable Energy for All, we're a UN program focused on the delivery of Sustainable Development Goal number 7. And so we work across the key global targets of deployment of clean and affordable renewable energy. And amongst the key global targets for 2030 are the tripling renewable energy and doubling energy efficiency targets. So now on the energy efficiency deployment targets, we've been really focused around the global platform of mission efficiency, which really looks at advocacy as well as technical capacity building, as well as matching investments to energy efficiency deployment. Now, on the topic of sustainable cooling, in our Chilling Prospects publication in 2023, we identified that over 1 billion vulnerable communities and populations exist worldwide with a high risk due to the lack of access to cooling solutions, high risk at adverse impacts of global warming. Now, out of this over 1 billion in population that are high risk, over 45% reside in Asia and the Middle East. And so with these really vulnerable populations in the region, about 670 million of them in the region that require access to sustainable cooling and have very, very high vulnerability to global warming impacts. What we have also discovered is that, in particular, the rural and urban poor populations are amongst the most vulnerable, with the lack of access to cooling impacting their thermal comfort as well as impacting food security, with the lack of access to electricity basically and lack of access to cooling solutions, making it impossible for them to continue to retain to avoid food spoilage and food wastage, and therefore impacting food security as well. So with those key factors in mind, let me now also invite our first speaker, Ms. Cecile Dahomey, I hope I pronounced it right, from Severe Consulting, to share with us a little bit more about her experience in Cambodia. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. So my name is Cécile Dahomey, and I'm happy to be here today with you to talk about this project that has been conducted with WWF in Cambodia. So just quickly introducing ourselves. So Severe is a consulting company, purpose-driven, based in Cambodia, but has been operating in developing countries in Africa and Asia. We are mainly working to support transition in the sector of energy, agriculture, water, and climate finance. So the projects I'm going to talk about, it was called, the objective was to reduce high energy use of outdated cooling systems, specifically in the hotel sector. So we did this study on 5 hotels, and in these hotels, the dominant energy was electricity. Mainly, it was powering chillers, ventilation, lighting, and cooking systems. The rest of the energy was used for kitchen operation and a bit of diesel for backup. All those hotels that were looked at were reputable hotels, and we tried to have a panel that would vary based in size, in age of the systems, etc. The idea was really to have a granular view of what would be the potential in the tourism sector in Cambodia. We installed some equipment to do some measurement, and what was interesting is that what we saw is that both weather and occupancy affect significantly electricity use, with hottest month having 35% higher electricity bill than average and lower 25%. So I'll just share with you now an example of one of the hotels, because of course all five had different situation. But this one, so it was a hotel of 90 with chiller systems from 1997. There were free chillers, but very low maintenance rate on those chillers, and as well as rotation and optimization of those chillers. And they were spending and they are spending $257,000 per year. And so after modeling, what came out is that if they were to replace the main chiller, they would have a simple payback of lower than 4 years and would be saving around 100K per year in energy. If they are not limited by the initial investment, they could be replacing 2 of their chillers, and that would optimize the duration and the lifespan of the chillers and enable them to cope better with higher occupancy rates as the tourism sector is increasing in Cambodia. When combining the 5 hotels, we are looking at an investment of 1.4 million. If it's optimized, really looking at what would make most sense for each one of a hotel, with for all of them a global simple payback of less than 5 years. So once we had seen this, the idea was looking at now the hotels, what were the different models possible for them to do those replacements. So of course you had the self-financing, you had the traditional bank loans and ESCO model. So in Cambodia, of course, self-financing, it's hardly possible for hotels owners and managers. Loan with the banks, it's available, but the interest rates are still very high. And so we looked at energy service companies. Right now we have really one energy service company that is operating in the country. The rest are companies that are willing to explore the model. And the current one that exists and that has been remaining in Cambodia doesn't invest with for lower than 500K. So the structure of the ESCO model that is currently being looked at is where, based on shared saving models with a performance contract, and the ESCO would finance and implement the upgrade. The hotel would keep up to 15% of the energy savings in the early years, while the ESCO would recover its costs through the rest. The advantage of this, hotels would benefit from reduced bills, while the ESCO will earn a return. Now, there are still some difficulties when we were discussing with both ESCOs and hotel owner. The main one between it being the alignment between the ownership and the management. So in the hotel sector, the managers are not the owners, and so it's really difficult to align the interest of both. The other thing is that the occupancy rate is really variable in the tourism sector, and it really varies also based on the events that are happening in specific hotels, not only a normal room occupancy rate, but also events. And so it makes it quite difficult to predict. The last challenge that I wanted to share is around the actual control that the managers of the hotels wants to keep on the hotel. Because of the performance contract, you would have elements that would be fixed in those contracts, and hotels that don't, they prefer to keep the full control of their operation. So where we are at, this study has been conducted, and now there is a partnership between WWF and another program, and I'll be happy to share about the learning of this other program also in Cambodia, because the idea has been for the past few years to experiment ESCO for agro-industry, and now to expand the ESCO model to the tourism sector. So we are really at this stage now in Cambodia. It's a pretty early stage, and it's on this, I would say, arduous learning path between both the government, the ESCO themselves that have to learn, the clients that are not fully aware about the model and what it requires, the financing system that is still trying to find and define itself, both for the direct consumer, but also for the ESCO themselves. So more than happy to exchange about those difficulties more in detail after. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Cecile. And with that, let me welcome Mr. Prasun Pandey from class for his presentation. Thank you.
At the outset, I would like to thank ADB for the opportunity, and good morning, everyone. I'm Prasoon, working with CLASP in India. Those who do not know CLASP, CLASP is a global not-for-profit working to improve the energy and environmental performance of everyday appliances. The other part of our work is enhancing access to energy through affordable and efficient appliances. So coming on to the topic. So in India, in the recent past, we have been working with many stakeholders to develop a business model to enhance access to cold storages, the cold chain equipment amongst the farmers. Now, why we are doing this? Essentially, I think most of us already know, India is an agriculturally led nation. Almost 20% of our GDP comes from agriculture, and it is a source of livelihood for almost 40 to 45% of our population. India happens to be one of the biggest producer of dairy and dairy products. It's the second largest producer of the fishes, fruits, vegetables, and a whole lot of other things. Now comes the challenge part. So while we are leading on the production of horticulture, fruits, and vegetables, most farmers, and especially the small landholders, essentially do not have access to cold chain. So India does have a good amount of cold chain infrastructure, but unfortunately that is largely used by middlemen, and by middlemen I would say the likes of traders and others. So that is the key problem that we face in India. The other aspect is that even if the cold chain infrastructure exists, it's usually very far from the farm gate. It's usually centered around urban areas. So that is another reason why the access is not so good. This all in all results in a good amount of wastage. And more than wastage, it's about the getting lower income to those farmers. Essentially, they are forced to do the sort of distress selling, and then that results in poorer prices for their producers. Now, if you would have if you are looking at this sector, you would realize in the past 3 or 4 years, there is a new wave of innovative solutions which are coming into the market. And that essentially is solar powered, very small cold chain solutions. The benefits are pretty obvious. They are closer to farm. They are independent of the grid. While they can be integrated with the grid, but the core selling point is that they can be grid independent for a longer period of time. And even if the sun is not there, some sort of thermal storage or battery storage systems gives them autonomy to operate up to 72 hours or something. Um, these are smaller, scalar, and modular. So if you need 1 ton worth of storage, you get one. If you in future, if you require more, you can just keep on integrating those modular solutions. And lastly, it does results to certain benefits to the farmer. They can store their produce for a slightly longer period of time, and whenever the price is better, probably they can sell it in the market. Now, while this solution is promising, it has its own challenges. Given the technology is pretty new, it's costly. There is high upfront cost that user or user group needs to pay. The business models are still evolving. And I would like to get into details of this. What we have observed is that while a consumer, or consumer, by consumer I mean farmer or farmer group, they may get these solutions, they probably are not able to use it effectively, because getting return out of this investment requires good market linkage, good business model, and ensuring that your asset is utilized throughout the year. A typical example is, for example, in India, mangoes are available for 2 months. A farmer group can go for this solution, but they would only be using this for 2 months. For the rest of the 10 months, what is the utilization of asset? No, probably not many people have an answer. The financing is pretty difficult to get at this point of time, because the rural banks or any other, they look at this in terms of a newer technology, and thus the higher risk is associated with that sort of lending, and a whole lot of awareness and other problems. Now, in essence, if you look at this solution, there is a huge latent demand for it in India. I would say virtually every farmer needs it, but probably no one knows about it. Now, to address various challenges associated with this type of technology, CLASP, essentially in collaboration with various other partners, developed a strategic plan, and then we executed that potentially innovative business model into a pilot. So what we did was, essentially we piloted with Energy Efficiency Services Limited. It is a super ESCO based out of India, the government of India supported. They essentially were willing to anchor the project, to undertake certain pilots. ADB was gracious enough to support, provide ESL with funds to procure up to 6 to 10 units. CLASP, the role we played essentially was as a stakeholder aggregator. We brought everyone together, we mobilized everything, we conceptualized the idea, we essentially provided technical advisory to ESL and various other entities as to how the program should be designed, executed on the ground. And lastly, we also mobilized certain rural livelihood organizations who have expertise in developing business plan, who can work with farmers to develop their crop pattern, crop plan, so that the asset can be utilized in a better manner. This essentially is in the nutshell, is what the operating model was. Energy Efficiency Services Limited, ESL, with certain funds from ADB, procured n number of solutions, implemented them near the consumer or farmer group. CLASP, while providing strategy and various other support, we mobilized ESAF and PEDO, essentially the Rural Livelihood Organization, to support those consumers in developing their own set of viable business models so that asset is utilized. Last but not the least, we also had an element of demand aggregation in this. So what ESL did was, like, they essentially purchased 6 to 10 solution in one go, and that is itself had a ripple effect in the market. The solution which was earlier costing X dollars is now costing half of it, essentially half. So this is the biggest success from this project. Even if the market is nascent, but demand aggregation can do wonders. So I don't think I need to talk about the demand or the bulk procurement model, but this led to a good impact on the ground. So this pilot is essentially still ongoing. We are working to, two, three installations are complete, but few are still ongoing. But when we look at the future, Our plan is to obviously evaluate the pilot to the finer details, conduct an independent third-party evaluation as to how it is working, what are the pathways for us to improve in the future. So we'll use these learnings to enhance and come to a better business model. The second part is essentially developing business models for end users. So farmers, while we are working with certain group of farmers and livelihood organization, but we want to sort of make an SOP or templatize it, working with academicians and various rural livelihood organization. The other part of work that essentially we are focusing is on that for the people like ESL or the ESCOs like ESL, it's difficult to find consumer because most of the time it's a farmer group. They might be buying one or two, but we are thinking of ways to aggregate demand so that ESL has a better, lesser overheads. So the agricultural cooperatives or like farmer producer companies, as we call them in India, if those can be a bulk consumer for ESL or anyone else, so that reduces the transaction cost and helps in better scale up. Lastly, and the most important is in India, the development of agriculture and infrastructure is largely driven by subsidies. And lot many central and federal and state agencies do provide good amount of subsidy. We are thinking right now how to ingrain subsidy model into such kind of business models. And one of the most important aspect is like we are trying to find roles or pathways for private investment capital as to how they can come in and maybe help in scale of such a business models. So with that, I would like to wrap my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prasoon. And with that, we have Mr. Aldrin Calderon from Mapua University to come and share his experience on the Philippine context. Thank you. Over to Aldrin, please.
Morning. So I'm Aldrin Calderon. At present, I'm working in the academe as the Dean of School of Mechanical Manufacturing and Energy Engineering of Mapua University, a local university here in the Philippines. This presentation is part of the project with UNDP and the Environmental Management Bureau, Climate Change Commission, and the Department of Energy. So this is the development of the Philippine National Cooling Action Plan, wherein we just didn't survey the amount of these cooling systems, but also to address the gap between the HPMP or the HFC Phase Out Management Plan and the HFC Phase Down Plan, which is the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol. Okay, in this presentation, I would like to address some of these questions. So clearly, not all knows why cooling warms our planet. So I'll just give a brief background on that. And then I'll explain some key figures or numbers from the global perspective up to the local numbers in terms of cooling. And then the significance of this project and the methodology. The development of the National Cooling Action Plan was initiated or spearheaded by from the UN system, and then from UNEP, and it's developed in different countries. And then we'll discuss some of the results, how this cooling plan was able to provide the Philippines an additional support in terms of the Paris Agreement targets. And then what's the way forward? So just to give a context, there are two main culprits of any cooling system. One is its emission from the leakage or nuts or poor installation. So that's what we called here on all our data that we will show, the direct impact. All refrigerants, as you know, from the CFCs, HCFCs, and the HFCs, they have different ozone depleting potential and at the same time, the global warming potential. Now, number two is the indirect impact. This is the energy consumed by the system. So in big chiller type, you have the kilowatt per tons of refrigeration. So basically, these two are the reasons why a cooling system have this a total CO2 emission of once you are operating it. So globally, 3.4 billions of residential cooling units projected by 2050, translating to 6,200 terawatt hour. Now, this total cooling energy use is translated to metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And in the Philippines, it was found that 70.3% of these cooling emissions are coming from indirect emissions. So again, going back to our previous slide, indirect emissions are those used by the energy consumed by the system. Now, but we don't just pull in all in the energy efficiency context because not all systems are installed in a very good way, so leakage are still coming. Now, here's what's good with what we've found here, and it could be the same with other countries as well. As we have this transition of HCFC, okay, before, just like here, the R22, you see, in the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol, what they say is to pace down gradually HFCs. But in the Philippine context, if you can see, this R410 is just ramping up. So it means we are very late, way behind in this transition of refrigerants. While we embrace also natural refrigerants, which pretty much very low in the global warming potential, apparently we are still importing all those HFCs. HFCs, just like for R22 and comparing it to the R410. R22, refrigerant 22 is HCFC, maybe 0.055 in terms of ozone depleting potential, while 410 is totally zero, meaning no harmful effect in the ozone. But R22, the global warming potential is around 1,810 or 1,820. For the global warming potential of R410, it's 2,088, something like that, close to 2,100. What does it mean? The Philippines is still importing these refrigerants. Now, this project, previously, the funding agency is called KSEP. Now it's Clean Cooling Collaborative. And the next phase of this project is what we are implementing now with DOE, the Department of Energy, and the Environmental Management Bureau, which is the Kigali Amendment part, the pace down of the R410, shifting to cooling systems using natural refrigerants. Basically, this is the roadmap developed by the Cool Coalition, also by UNEP, and this was presented last year in the third Asian International Conference for Energy and Environment in Indonesia. And one of the key factor that we've found in this study that can be also the same with other countries. Well, domestic refrigeration and residential cooling are really one of those who contributes. No? But the HPMP is one. This is the HCFC Pace Out Management Plan. And HPDP, we just call it the HFC Pace Down Plan. Okay? With the RCS or the our from baseline scenario. So this reference cooling scenario, comparing it to the sustainable cooling scenario, if we implement all the mandates of our Department of Energy in terms of minimum energy performance and other energy outlook in terms of the reduction, it's roughly 4.41 terawatt hours savings. That's much 12.15 terawatt hours for residential cooling. It was launched also with the Department of Energy with the Director Patrick Aquino. So together with our Environmental Management Bureau, and it can contribute close to 12% of the unconditional commitment of the Philippines in terms of the Paris Agreement. So with that, if you have questions on the details, you can check. It's published in Scopus Index conference, and I can help you with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aldrin. And up next, definitely last but not least, we have Alfredo Banyo from the ADB. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of ADB, thank you for coming, for those brave participants to come to this session. I'm going to just give a brief description of what ADB has been doing in this sector. Just to manage expectations hasn't been a lot, but we are trying. It's a difficult sector for us to get in because of how we are structured, but I'll show some decent experiences. So just to put us, to give some background, we are all pretty familiar with what are the challenges of how to develop or mainstream efficient cooling. Many of you guys are facing them every day. And essentially it's based on 4 key aspects. Weak policies and not very conducive regulation that promote efficiency in cooling. Probably related because cooling is something that's relatively new in some places, and regulation tends, and it's time to catch up. Another is affordability and short-term focus. The other speakers mentioned that the upfront cost is high, and for many people it's difficult to take that decision, or they are not able to take that decision because of affordability problems. Also, a lack of awareness. We've seen that cooling is the last thing in the mind of many people until the cost gets to a point of pain. But many don't think about it, and they are not even familiar with the different options they can choose, even at the same price level. And then we have business barriers, more for a lack of capacity of technicians, things related to lack of maintenance that increase inefficiencies, and things like that. So let's see what we have been doing in this sector. Most of our approach to these relatively new technologies, again, new technologies for us because it's not our main business, we approach them through technical assistance. Technical assistance is a grant that we provide to developing countries, DMCs, and they have different angles. For example, in the one is promoting life cycle management of fluorocarbons. As you know, they are very harmful for the ozone layer, but also they have a very big global warming impact. And in that sense, there's been a technical assistance from 21 that was looking at this. In the PRC, we have been developing also some targeted TAs in the cooling sector. And very recently, the Ningbo Urban Green and Low Carbon Development Project, in particular its output 2, looks at how to develop sustainable cooling or more efficient cooling using ESCO models and micro and small enterprises in that city. We also had another TA related to building energy efficient decentralized air conditioning systems. And again, this has to usually using grants and providing technical assistance, capacity building, training, and micro and mini pilots in some places like the ones described with EESL. And again, perhaps EESL was one of the most successful or largest programs related to cooling that ADB led, and obviously with the cooperation of the Energy Efficiency Services Limited in India. and there was a large pilot that TA and later ensuing loan that provided funding to pilot the kind of market creation for super efficient air conditioning units in India. It had different phases. It started in 2016, 2017, and then later it was the ESL partnered with a private company to develop an online platform, and now consumers in India can access or can buy very efficient air conditioning at a price level comparable to medium and less efficiency. And those things using a bulk procurement, something that ESL was good at because it's a super ESCO backed by the government of India and can access sovereign lending from ADB, but also because it's a level of subsidy into the process. This program and this pilot was supported as well, not only by ADB, but the UNEP and KfW. And of course, I don't want to forget Global Environmental Facility provided grants. We also did what we call TICs, the Technology Innovation Challenges. That's something that started, I think, around the time of COVID. And we ran a few of them. These ones are essentially calls for proposals of innovators that want to, if they have a good solution, we are able to provide them with grants. So there were two related with cooling, run in 21 and 24. The first one was disease resilient energy efficiency centralized air conditioning linked to the TA that I described before. To identify and pilot the smart centralized ACs, the awarded company was Parivartan Transformation from India, and now in partnership with Sri Lanka Ministry of Power, they're actually running a very nice program that it's essentially rehabilitating and changing 3 public buildings to very efficient air conditioning with significant impact in terms of energy savings. Another one was launched last year in 24, and it was awarded to an NGO in Cambodia, and it was called Rising Above the Heat and has a very strong gender component. And this was more related to rural population and how to keep food at home and things like that. The other one was more public buildings to a different scale. We also have some knowledge products. Recent one, it's a book that I participated in the editing and the writing, and it's called Sustainable Cooling, How to Cool the World Without Warming the Planet. This is a book that was kind of tailored to policymakers for our DMCs. It's not a textbook, but it has enough detail for practitioners, but it also has simple messages for policymakers. So they can understand what are the options and what is the importance and what are the things they can do about it and when they're taking decisions in terms of policy. And for those that don't like reading too much but prefer to watch videos, we have also a very nice and short e-training that was developed with ADBI, where, again, to policymakers, very simple language, not very technical, but good enough to show different options and why it's important to start thinking about low carbon and sustainable cooling. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much, and looking forward for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alfredo. With that, let me invite the panelists to join me on stage for the panel discussion. Cecile, Alfred, Aldrin, and Prasoon, please. Perfect. So we've got a series of questions, both from online and some guiding questions that we had designed earlier. I will also make sure we take a bit of time for some audience Q&A. So let's do that. But first, let me kick off. I think I want to pick up on Alfredo's presentation earlier and really just look at how we look at multi-stakeholder collaboration in terms of the framework around building ESCOs, because we've in the room, all the energy efficiency practitioners are probably familiar with how we've talked about energy efficiency for a very long time as a low-hanging fruit. It's a low-hanging fruit that has frustrated so many of us because why is it not being adopted if it's so low-hanging? And and so over to you, Alfredo, on the role of multi-stakeholder partnerships as in scaling ESCOs and how we make this low-hanging fruit more widely adopted. Thank you.
Okay, I'm afraid I don't have a good answer for this one. The issue that we face as a large MDB, it's the type of instruments and financing instruments that we can use. ESCO markets, primarily driven by small companies using usually performance contracts, is something that is very difficult for us to access. That's why we usually work through super ESCOs, which are public entities that we can channel public sovereign funding through MOF of each country to them, case in point ESL, but also super ESCOs that we work with in China. Currently, I'm based in Uzbekistan, and with the MOF, we are developing another super ESCO for Uzbekistan with the idea of building a ESCO market there. And again, very difficult for us to try to do it bottom up. So we are trying to do it from the top, and hopefully that trickling down helps create a market. We are working on policies and regulations that have worked in other countries, particularly in Europe and the US, where some of those tools and financing instruments where we can go through financial intermediary institutions, commercial banks, for example, and others, is also something that we are trying to do. But again, we don't have a lot to show off about this, and it's a very difficult subsector for MDBs to work. So,
Thank you very much, Alfredo. And let me come to Prasoon next and really look at, given the challenges and the, I guess, new business model looking at this, and given the depth of experience in India as a fairly more developed market for ESCOs and energy efficiency, what kinds of partnerships are you seeing that has been really effective in unlocking these ESCO activity in the context of India and broader in the region as well? Prasoon, thanks.
ESCO market, I would say, still is an evolving or nascent market space in India, but we have had certain good experiences. So ESL has been the key recurring term. So ESL was in the past, ESL was able to transform market towards efficient lighting in India. So within that, the partnership that played the key role was essentially their discussion with various government entities, and more so in terms of the business transaction efforts. So, for example, ESL was deep into engaging with various municipal corporations and asking them or pushing them that why don't you replace your street lights or any other public infrastructure lights with efficient LED ones. So this is one subset of example. I mean, the interaction or engagement that needs to happen within their stakeholders. In terms of the larger ESCO ecosystem to evolve, I think the discussions that need to happen are essentially on the risk management. Given the nature of business itself, probably a better discussion needs to happen between the FIs, the consumers, the technology suppliers as to allocating the risk, whichever entity is best suited to address that risk, that should be allocated that risk. With this guiding principle, probably better stakeholder engagement and the ecosystem evolution needs to happen. Because as I said, the ESCO ecosystem is still evolving in India.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Prasoon. I'll come to Cecile next and look at some of the enabling factors. We've talked a bit about risk. Prasoon talked a bit about risk. I want to touch on, what are some of the enabling factors. For example, we've got a question from online that also looks at, has there been any support from the Ministry of Tourism, for example, as a partner that can help to provide confidence, especially in the context of the Cambodian sustainable cooling deployment in the tourism sector, and how does that help de-risking that process? Cecile, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I'll step back a little bit because, so as I was mentioning, in Cambodia, we are really starting on the energy efficiency and ESCO journey. We had 2 years ago a national energy efficiency policy coming up, but really starting implementation has been pretty difficult. And so there are multiple stakeholders in parallel that have been trying to build that kind of ecosystem and enabling conditions. One, and I'll just share some of the key parameters for me that are absolutely essential. The first one is about skills. And skills, for me, it's both to support the government, because the government needs to come up with regulation that they do understand. And so that's where a lot is needed. And in terms of prioritization, what needs to come first? That's often a question that we hear. So skills at government level, but also skills at ESCO level or willing to become ESCO, so baby ESCOs kind. They are, so we also don't have the solar system, the solar regulation for to support the ESCO world. So it needs to be purely on energy efficiency, which makes it quite tricky. So skill is one of the things. The second is demand creation. And this is another area where you had quite a lot of development agencies trying to push for energy audits being done of different so walkthroughs, but going up to energy IGAs, investment grade audits. But the problem is if there is no aggregation behind the demand creation, then it's really hard to address. The two last one that I'd like to mention. So of course, the regulation in itself to support, and support from the government. So what you were mentioning, there could be some changes in the procurement, or there could be some focus in some specific sector, for example, the cooling sector, where you have more potential. Last element is the financial sector, but I would say this is almost the one that has been moving the fastest in Cambodia and where people are most interested, but all the other ones are a bit lacking behind. So all of this needs to move in parallel.
Thanks, Cecile. That's a really good segue talking about regulatory frameworks and government policy. I'd like to invite Aldrin now to share a bit more perspective around, especially in the Philippine context, how government policy, regulatory frameworks, including maps, how you see that helping the ecosystem in general, but also in particular on sustainable cooling. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Basically, for the Philippines, the Department of Energy has its own program called GEMP, the Government Energy Management Program. So all building facilities under the government or the public sector, these are mapped out to have the first tranche of energy audits. Now, these buildings are consuming very high in terms of the kilowatt hour per square meter. These are old buildings, and every year the government bid out different tranches of, for example, one area, one region, and it will be awarded to an ESCO. So I think in the last 3 years, it was basically 70% of the government buildings were already audited. Now, I think the next phase of that is to really introduce a project wherein energy efficiency would be the main goal to reduce the kilowatt hour per square meter consumption. But I don't have the details of that kind of approach. Now, basically, that's how the government treat or implements project, no, for the ESCO community. It's not only giving them this law, the energy efficiency law, to support them in terms of their engagement with private sector, with buildings, with malls, offices, but it also the government wants to show that we are your partners to implement the energy efficiency law, and we will do it as well. So that's why they have this kind of energy audits.
Thanks very much, Aldrin. I want to come back to Prasoon to think about a little bit more about local government, municipal level government interventions around the ecosystem development. And we sometimes hear very much that local government can help to move things along a little bit more quickly, and do a lot more piloting types of levels of intervention. So maybe Prasoon, you have some examples to share. Thanks.
Um, Thanks, Jacqueline. Quite an interesting question. So India, I mean, as you know, follows three-tiered governance: central, state, and yes, sorry. So India has a three-layered governance structure: central, state, and municipal. So one of the past example I did talk about, but some of the recent work that are being taken up in India are essentially the adaptation for extreme heat. So while I have not been working on these things, but I've been reading more about the cool roof type of initiatives where the municipalities do engage with the most deprived section of the community, the smaller homes, not so properly built homes, and just enabling them to take passive measures to undertake the upcoming heat stress. So something on the lines of cool roofs and others. One potential area that I see essentially is, and this relates to the point that sir was speaking earlier. So that given that India already has a good framework around standards and labeling program and various other efficiency standards, the municipalities can essentially can create their own AC replacement program, or as a replacement program which is targeting the local populace. Saying so because while typically the end of life for a typical AC in India, or like around India, or like globally as well, is around 8 to 10 years. But if you look at the low income communities, they do buy or use refurbished ACs, which might be operating for like almost 15 to 20 years. So low income community, if they want to get an access to AC, they are likely going to purchase a refurbished one, which already is just maybe 10 to 12 years old. Refurbished, their efficiency goes down even further, and then they use. So it's a massive energy guzzler. Now, municipalities in partnership with ESCOs probably can devise a replacement program that would not only enhance access to sustainable or cool cleaning, but in terms like if a program is structured better, it can deliver a whole lot of saving as well. So it hits two targets at one time: enhanced access to cooling and efficient.
Thank you very much, Prasoon. I'll come to Alfredo next, but on the topic of the AC replacement, this is of course a range of technologies that are there's a very wide range of technologies that are available for sustainable cooling deployment. In the SE for All context, in fact, we're working at the the provincial level in India, across Odessa, a few other provinces, to also look at some of the passive cooling solutions, from white roofs to improvements around urban planning of new developments for better ventilation, where there are a significant range of passive cooling solutions that can offer up to 2 to 3 degrees temperature reduction. So I have a question for Alfredo from online, asking about is ADB supporting any CO2-based refrigerant chiller for commercial or data center or industrial applications? But I think really the question, looks at, what are some of the innovative technologies that ADB sees as upcoming in the pipeline? And please go ahead, Alfredo. Thank you.
While we like to think that we are innovative, we are essentially a bank that responds to a demand from governments. So governments don't want to risk sovereign financing into things that are not really well proven and tried elsewhere. So going to things that are not really, basic infrastructure is something that we don't do a lot, but we still do. Now, whether data centers, innovative cooling solutions, that's not really a part of our business except for private sector operations, which we deal directly with private companies. They borrow on commercial basis. So those we do. For example, battery energy storage systems, we have been doing a lot of them, most of them with private sector. Cooling, again, not something we do a lot. We wish to do more. So far, there is not a lot of demand for us to do this type of things. We would be happy to, my private sector colleagues would like to go with data center developers to do all this innovative cooling. And to finalize, we are getting more into industry. That's something that we haven't done a lot. So industry, decarbonization of industrial processes, both for heating, cooling, wherever that is reducing carbon emissions of heavy industry, that's something that we are starting relatively recently getting into. For example, Central Asia, which I'm part of some programs, but in other places, particularly in China. So if cooling is related to this industrial decarbonization, ADB is starting to be part of, even though we don't have a lot to show so far.
And we hope to see more as well. We're all rooting for a growing portfolio of sustainable cooling projects in ADB, so that's good to hear. One last question from the online audience for Cecile before I open to the audience in the room. So for Cecile, there was a question here about was waste heat recovery considered as part of the new chillers that are deployed in the hotels that can reduce hot water demand and improve the cost economics of the resort, the hotel sustainable cooling deployment project? Thanks.
So yes, it was looked at during the study, but then some of the limitation is what is available in country. So also to be able to have some quotations, see what is being able to be maintenance after installation, etc. We finally went for solutions that would be locally available and easier to maintain. Because these are first projects and you really want to make sure that they'll succeed over the lifespan of the system. So more innovative or more refined solutions have definitely been looked into, but maybe at a later stage, because as I was mentioning, the hotels, both managers and owners need first to be convinced, and it's easier to convince them on solutions that they understand first. So baby steps, I would say.
Thank you very much, Cecile, for that. And with that, yes, the gentleman over there, very quick hands. Please introduce yourself, sir, and then your question. Thank you.
I am from India. We are BACS Rajdhani Power Limited. We are in power distribution business in Delhi. And the topic is quite relevant to us because that covers the very important aspect of energy efficiency program. We were fortunate to get benefit of ADB intervention in cooling system through ESL. We implemented 5-star AC program, BLDC fan program, energy efficient lighting program in Delhi area. And one of the biggest benefit I can say today is that in 2017-18, first time we launched a 5-star AC scheme. It was with 30% subsidy through regulatory intervention. Today, in the current year, we have a 50% subsidized scheme. And the most fortunate part of that scheme is that the same product is available on Amazon with the same scheme. So that's where we were looking the availability, the so similar option in the market so that inefficient cooling system won't survive for long. And a natural ecosystem evolved without any subsidy or sustainable support. Now, coming to the topic, I have a question to the ADB speaker. In today's session, what I learned, there is a wonderful initiative from across the globe about CO2 footprint reduction and bringing energy efficiency in the cooling. But one very important part missing is that today's electricity grid is facing a big challenge in meeting a peak demand, and that peak demand is driven by cooling system. Now, we don't see any program which talks about a demand response program. a capability of cooling system to interact with utility control system so that there can be incentivize a program which is more economical than building a more grids or bringing more efficiency in the system. Because by bringing the SE temperature set point only 1 degree, it can save 7% energy efficiency. Neither there any building costs. Most of them are talks about a per square meter energy consumption. None of them are talking about what is their peak demand requirement and at what time. So ADB or any of the financing program, if you talk about this requirement, will definitely help us to bring capability which can be harnessed by all of us in the down the line to mitigate the peak demand requirement. That was first one question. And the second one is to our Cambodian speaker. Are you promoting anywhere in your hotel industry the electrical cooking system? Because it doesn't need a fossil fuel. I think it's a clean cooking solution. And we are from metro, and the biggest problem in our Delhi metro is that there is a massive pollution. There are many sources, external and within the city. One of them is electrical vehicle, where massive efforts are from government of India to shift from fossil fuel to the electrical vehicle. The another missing part is cooking area. It's a huge consumption of cooking gas. And that gas generates a heavy, massive fuse, and that fuse required a time for disbursement. And we don't have time. We have to cook 3 times in a day. But that can be solved if electrical cooking is adopted. So if you can share your experience globally or any insight on that subject, it will really help. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Alfredo first, and then Cecile. Thanks.
Okay, very good question. It's right my alley because actually my main job is I work with electricity grids, not so much on cooling, unfortunately. So addressing peak demand and demand side response at the low voltage level, that's something that many countries are approaching now very seriously. I can give examples, for example, of Uzbekistan. It's my current country, but in other countries in the past, we've been doing similar things. We developed first and deployed the country with smart meters by two-way communication, initially for billing, and reducing the famous commercial losses, essentially theft. But what we're doing now is to do several studies in terms of how to shift, but also provide grid stability at the low voltage level because of 3 factors. One is the significant increase in air conditioning. As you know, is one of the largest consumers of electricity and providers of peak load, usually in the evenings in many countries. The other is significant increase in electric vehicle charging. People tend to plug them when they arrive home, and they start charging right away, even though electric vehicles have smart chargers, and then they can decide when to charge, which is something very useful. The meter doesn't have to intervene. And third, it has to do with more and more electrification of services in households. As you said, many people are getting into electric cookers. The new apartment buildings don't have gas anymore. They're going into electric heating as well, etc. So we're seeing that a significant stress put into the low voltage networks, and we have to address them very quickly. If we want to increase capacity with this demand management, not only response is perhaps not the right concept, but if we try to just add capacity, it has to triple or quadruple very quickly because of all these new electric services. A data that it might be interesting to you, electricity networks at low voltage have a 15% utilization ratio, meaning that you have to build around 6 times your peak load because it's never constant. So there is a huge waste in terms of infrastructure, and digitization is the way forward. And that's something that ADB is very active through technical assistance plus lending. And in countries like Uzbekistan, China in the past, many other countries, we are active in this role, which is indirectly related to cooling, but again, is going to support more cooling because of a better management of the power system. Hope this answers your question.
Thanks very much, Cecil. And then I'll also invite Prasoon after that to speak on this topic. Thanks, Cecil, please.
So thank you for your questions. For these specific hotels, not really the discussion, because these were 5-star hotels. And so in the kitchen, they had very different type of cooking. They had both electrical, but because of the meals that they prepare, they needed different type of cooking. But the electric cooking is actually looked at for more household and smaller restaurants level. And what is really tricky is changing the habits of people. There is more electrification in the country, so now people can have the choice. But what you see when you introduce electric cooking is that sometimes it's not a full replacement. It's just there are things that they're going to do with the electric cooking, while there are other meals that they'll continue doing with more traditional wood, and sometimes even LPG. So you end up having more of a diversification of the means that are utilized than a complete replacement. And LPG is still really, really successful in Cambodia, and electric has been quite difficult to shift fully the habits based on the cooking practice.
Just
okay.
to support before Prasun, I can share few data on that subject. In Delhi, we have experimented with commercial cooking, and we converted around 100 cookings, the industrial cookings, and few hotels completely electrical, and it is doing wonderful job. So you can learn that part.
Sir, on the demand response, as Alfredo said, most of the demand, the peak load demand and sudden demand is coming from cooling devices, largely ACs in India. So what's happening the way it is being addressed in India right now is that Bureau of Indian Standard is working to draft standard for demand response capabilities within ACs. So this is a new work that has been initiated. But the end of the line vision is that once the demand response ready AC standards are made available, maybe in few years timeline, manufacturers would be able to produce ACs which have demand response flexibility capability in them. And a program operator or a demand aggregator could aggregate thousands and hundred thousands of such ACs and provide DR capability to discoms. So this is one leg of work that is happening. On the electric cooking side, we were also trying to look at how to promote electric cooking in India. And one of the potential bottleneck or the first barrier is that you would realize that electric induction hobs, they were not labeled earlier. So now the Bureau of Energy Efficiency has launched a labeling program, but that's just the starting step. If you look at the market, the hobs are single zone cooking hobs in India. And if we were to switch completely to electric cooking, it must have 2 or 3 cooktops, which can meet needs of a family. So these are the things that are being discussed and analyzed. And I think very recently, it's yet to come out in public domain, but the labeling program for induction hob is about to be made mandatory. So that essentially would ensure that all the hobs are mandatorily labeled, and maybe inefficient products are going to get out from the market, but it would take its own time. There were a few initiatives similar to what you suggested. There were once a discussion around market transformation towards electric cooking. Uh, Under that, people were exploring strategies as to how can a demand aggregation program for efficient cooking can reduce the prices, enhance adoption. ESL has been the recurring word, but ESL has a pilot electric efficient cooking program. I might be missing on the name, but under which they were trying to, again, bulk procure induction cooktops. But I think their approach was to first look at institutional consumers. There's a small portion for retail consumers, but that's how they were trying to approach it. So I would say it is still a work in progress.
Thank you. We have one more. Okay, one more question. Okay, we'll have the last two, yes, from each of these gentlemen. Okay, thank you.
Uh, Thank you very much for the session. I'm Rajesh. I'm from the International Finance Corporation. Just picking up on one point, Catherine, I think you brought it out on the potential with the local governments, which is the municipal entities, be it across the region. The electricity is one of the largest expenditures for them. In many countries, they have subnational devolution that meets some of their costs. And each of the countries have ESCOs, which can do this. I think what's really missing is not sovereign borrowing. It's actually some kind of either an institution or a mechanism that can give comfort to the ESCOs that the payment would get ring-fenced, that the savings are ring-fenced, and those could be available over a 5 or a 7-year period to recover that investment. So it's not so much about sovereign investment or World Bank or ADB investing, but rather, say, working with an EESL in the case of India or similar entities if they don't exist in the other countries, to actually make the market, which is currently not working, because we see all of these reports where there are huge potential for cooling or huge potential for energy efficiency. I've myself worked in the market for water and wastewater energy, but you don't see these happening because that market making function is still not there. I think what's being done by, for instance, ADB or other entities that work in that interface with the government to make that market so that it can then bring a lot of the private investment and efficiency into it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. I'll just hijack this briefly and I'll invite the rest of the panel to also intervene. That's a really good point. And I think one of the ways that we're working to address this in sustainable energy for all through the mission efficiency platform is precisely we call it the mission efficiency marketplace. And in the local government settings that we're operating in India, this is what we're looking at as well, looking at the different government agencies at the provincial level and how we aggregate demand for ESCO in a very similar way, actually, that Algin was describing earlier. Government buildings for audit, first and foremost, bidding that out to ESCOs, creating that marketplace through public procurement, and then also through that also creating demand and putting out the data of the cost savings by the government officers through the energy efficiency adoption, and then using that as awareness building mechanisms for industry adoption, and then followed by residential commercial adoption as well. So we found that model to be quite, I mean, it's very on the ground, pragmatic practices that have very tangible numbers and cost savings proof of concept. So we found that to be quite effective. And then I think with that, let me now hand over to the rest of the panel. Yes, Alfredo, please.
Yeah, so that's a very good point. Most of our work really, from ADB as well as World Bank perspective, is working with the government to create this enabling environment. We are not really able, we can through financial intermediation, but it's difficult for us to finance ESCO business, private ESCO business. But what we can do, as you said, is to create those regulations, those policies, and also help structure a super ESCO or similar. It doesn't have to be a super ESCO, but maybe a public company or public participated company that they provide three things. One is a minimum level of standard of the equipment that you can use, minimum level of technical capacity of the contractors and ESCOs that participate in that market that is facilitated through this. And the third one is channeling subsidies, because sometimes we tend to forget, particularly in some countries with regulated tariffs, the government subsidizes by default through a regulated tariff. When the tariff is too low, people tend to, be inefficient. And it's very difficult in some places to increase tariffs. But what they can do is to switch the subsidy from one to the other. And it's just essentially changing money from one pocket to the other pocket. You help people access more efficient appliances that will consume less energy, so you have to subsidize less electricity at the end of the day. That's something that all these things can be done through the public sector, and that's something that IDB is very well positioned to do. And that's something that we try. And that's part of our focus in several countries.
So just to add on the India perspective or experience, so the purpose of Super ESCO essentially was to create an ecosystem where the other smaller ecosystem could, ESCOs could thrive, but unfortunately it has not turned out that way. Now, there were a few intervening type of activities which were taken by stakeholders in India, which may or may not have been successful. But one of the challenges that was realized for ESCO market to grow was in India, there wasn't any model ESCO contract that two parties could use. So there was some, I mean, this goes a bit back, but there was some efforts to draft certain model ESCO contracts which parties could use because it was then the need. Second, few people also tried to develop or advocate for a customized insurance product that could be used by the ESCOs or the consumers as to what happens when the default happens, and it went a bit more technical in terms of the energy savings deemed not getting up, the measurement and evaluation related uncertainties as well. There were also certain analytical and advocacy type of engagement as to if there is given that the savings have to be measured and verified, there has to be a cadre of independent third party MNV people. And in case of there is certain conflict or the contract not being met, it shouldn't ideally be going to a typical civil court. There should be a specialized people to look into these things. So these are the activities that have been done in India to maybe make ESCO business case better, but the results need to be seen. Jury is still out.
Great, thanks. And the last question to that gentleman in queue. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, and greetings. I'm Sione Misi from the Department of Energy, Kingdom of Tonga. Thank you to all the presenters for the very informational presentation. We, from the Pacific and in Tonga, we are currently enforcing the minimum energy performance standards and labeling regulations, focusing on two appliances at the moment. One is household refrigerators and also the air conditioners. It's about to meet some certain standards, for example, the Australian and the New Zealand standards, or some approved jurisdictions. Our market is products from mostly our markets at the moment is in the retailers and suppliers are from China, India, Singapore, with a little bit of labels attached to these appliances. And the challenge is when we're enforcing this, it will restrict importing of appliances from the Asian countries. These are great products. So I'm not sure if this is the right platform, but since the session is from the Asia and the Pacific, our markets is half of our markets and most of our markets is from the Asian countries. Is it possible to extend whatever standards that manufacturers and providers to meet the specific standards that we are currently trying to enforce in our country, and also the specific labeling that our regulations is trying to enforce for and efficient appliances for the people in the whole country. For example, the labeling of some products from Singapore, it provides cost that it runs per year, which is false in other countries. But still, those products are export, and we import those into the countries, and it will lead a false labeling for the country and for the people to say that this cost that's the annual That's the annual energy consumption per year. But that's based on the electricity tariff of Singapore, and it's not applied to other countries that those products are exported to. So I wanted to raise that because we are some of the member countries in the Pacific were trying to enforce these minimum energy performance standards labeling regulations, but yet some of our markets and products are from the Asian countries, which it will be a challenge for the countries, especially with Tonga. Thank you.
So maybe better position to answer this. So you're pretty much right. The information that would be displayed on the label would be for that country. But if I could talk about a recent development that has happened. So India and Bhutan last year entered into an agreement where, and it essentially was on harmonization of maps or the standards and labels program of India within Bhutan. The way it would work is through such an arrangement, Bhutan would be able to access all the basic underlying information related to the appliance's performance. So any appliance that is sold in the market in India, it has to be tested in the lab. Various efficiency parameters and other things are tested. The report is generated. So under the MRA, Bhutan would be able to access the performance parameters of that product from Government of India. And then they can use that information to build further their own label. They could very well recognize Indian label and then maybe add on a certain bit of domestication or indigenization to add a few more details. I'll be happy to connect with you after this session to talk in depth about it, the various ways. But harmonization is a good path forward. It could be with India, China, or Australia, New Zealand, whichever country you work with.
Okay, so thank you very much. And I just want to also highlight one more point, I think, on the harmonization of maps. I don't have a very specific answer for you, sir, with regards to the Pacific Island maps, but I think this is absolutely an area where the regional harmonization of maps, at least in the ASEAN context in Southeast Asia, that is an area that the governments are exploring precisely because of the large amount of appliances that are being exchanged around the region and the need for harmonization of the minimum performance standards. And while that is also currently ongoing in the Southeast Asia context, very much welcome Pacific Islands perspective on this topic. And in upcoming discussions that we will be actually having with the Secretary of the Pacific Community next month as well, we'll be very keen to put that on the radar and continue discussions around how we can support that from a broader standpoint, because it definitely sounds like across the wider region that there is a need for harmonization of maps, and we can look at a broader collaboration across the board on that. With that, I maybe will do something a little bit different and close the session a little early and let everyone have extra 3 minutes for lunch. Unless okay, perfect. Thank you all very much for the participation today, and we've definitely welcomed the continued dialogue on this very important topic of energy efficiency and sustainable cooling. So please feel free to reach out to any of the panelists or myself if you have any further questions. Thank you so much. Have a really good lunch. Thank you.